Hey, what is up guys? This is Mischief from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Power of the Elements, but really, I feel like with the rarities that were revealed, the set isn't as exciting as it should be. Now don't get me wrong, it's an amazing set, it's a game changer, and it's great for those players that want to play sprites or tier elements and they don't have to buy like 3 secret rares per archetype. But if you guys were buying cases hoping that you'd be able to flip singles as a profit, well, I don't think you guys should be expecting to see as much of a return as you would have if the cards were printed in higher rarities. I only see really like 4 good secrets in the set and the rest are kind of whatever. And yeah, the ultras are great, but with how much of the set is going to be opened because there's so many meta cards, they can only be worth so much. So I'll start by going over a couple of the cards that I think are worth discussing, and then we'll jump into our usual Market Watch content. Let's get started. So we're going to start off with looking at what I guess is like the generic chase card of the set, and that is Ultimate Slayer. So this is a normal spell card that lets you get rid of an opponent's monster on the field by sending a corresponding monster of the same extra deck type, so Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link, from your own extra deck to the graveyard, and also your opponent cannot activate a monster effect in response to this card's activation. So not only does this get rid of a problematic monster, but it also means you can trigger the effect of your own extra deck monsters being sent to the graveyard, so things like Elder Entity Entis, Psyframe Lord Omega, and Tri-Brigade Farragut. Naturally, this is one of the most hyped cards in the set. It has seen a bunch of side deck play in the OCG, and players are definitely expecting it to be good in the TCG as well. As a result, it does command a whopping $60 price tag, which is only behind Sprite Blue in terms of price. And this does kind of make sense, right? It's a generic spell card, so it naturally gets looked at and compared to things like Triple Tactics Talent and Forbidden Droplets, each of which were over $100 a piece. However, while the card is good, I don't think it's going to be good right off the bat. For a lot of decks, especially like Tier Elements, Sprite, Despia, extra deck space can be really tight, and I'm not sure if you can afford to give up some of the slots in your extra deck for cards that you might only use situationally. Even if you do side deck the extra deck monsters and this card, that's a lot of side deck slots that you're taking up when you could be playing some other alternatives. In addition, I do think that a lot of the cards we've been seeing trending recently kind of focus on outing multiple cards, right? So things like Lava Golem, Sphere Mode, Dark Ruler No More, Evenly Matched, they are all able to out multiple pieces of the opponent's board. Now, that being said, I think its price has started off a little bit too high. I'm expecting this card to fall between $40 to $50 each, just because early on, I don't think it's going to see as much usage as some of the other cards we have in the format. Of course, from there, it does depend on the format and what decks and boss monsters are seeing play. At any rate, I wouldn't want to pick up this card at its current pre-sale price. Definitely wait for a bit more before you pick up your set. The next card, which is the only other card I really wanted to talk about from Power of the Elements, is Kurikara Devincarnate. This is a neat little hand trap that almost seems to be like a Nibiru type of card. You can special summon this card by tributing all face-up monsters on the field that have activated their effects this turn in your opponent's monster zones, and then it gains 1500 attack points for each card tributed. Also, during your end phase, you can target a monster in your opponent's graveyard and special summon it to your side of the field. So I remember when I first read this card, right, I was kind of like, whoa, this card seems really great. It's going to be the next new board breaker. It's almost like a Nibiru, but I can use it during my turn, but I don't have to wait for 5 of anything. However, I think that the card is actually massively overrated. I feel like if I'm using Kurikara, I've already used the other resources in my hand to force my opponent's monster's effects to activate, so then I can summon my Kurikara, but I don't have any resources to really follow up with. Like, I understand what the card is trying to do, but I feel like it's just not really worth the effort, and I think that in the OCG they found the same thing to be true, right? Because I haven't really seen this card being used too much in a lot of the topping deck lists over there. I think that if you were going to try and use this card, you are better off using a more consistent board breaker like Dark Ruler No More. However, the reason I bring it up is because in the short time that this card has been available for pre-order on TCG Player, it seems like the price has been increasing. According to TCG Player, a lot of the card's early sales were down at around that like $10 to $15 mark, but recently we've started to see some sales around $25 to $30, which is honestly a bit concerning to me because that seems really high, right? So when my friends and I were discussing this card, we each placed it at like $10. So seeing actual sales being made at this high of a price point is definitely weird to me. Maybe I'm missing something, but if I were you guys, I definitely stay away from this card early on and wait for its price to tank back down considerably, and then later on consider buying a set if you really want to try it out for yourself. On to some non-Power of the Elements cards. Let's take a look at Evil Twins Kissakill and Lilla. So I know it's kind of confusing, but Kissakill and Lilla are usually separate cards since they are each one of the twins, but there is a boss main deck monster that contains both of their names. This thing does have a potentially useful effect where you can special summon it by attributing 2 link monsters, and then if you do, if your opponent controls 3 or more cards, they have to send cards from their field to the graveyard until they only control 2. Now, while this effect is cool, it's probably not something you're going to be resolving very often, but that's okay. We are actually just interested in this card for keeping it in the deck, not drawing it. With Ultimate Slayer coming out in Power of the Elements, a lot of people are looking at Trouble Sunny in the extra deck, as it's one of the best dump targets to help get rid of link monsters. However, running Trouble Sunny actually means that you need to play an Evil Twin monster in the main deck, and Evil Twins Kissakill and Lilla is the best option available. This has resulted in a price jump for the Evil Twins, who have ever only been printed in Genesis Impact. The Ultras have gone from around $3 to now being $10 each, and the Collector's Rares have also moved up over the last few months from being down at $40 to now being up at $70. So yeah, very significant price movement over the last few months. So if you guys did open some Genesis Impact trying to get those Drytron cards or something like that, this might be a dud pull that you just threw into your bulk and forgot about, so you definitely want to try and dig these up and offload them before the card gets reprinted. Next up, we have Mathemic Superfactorial. So with the release of Mathemic Circular in Power of the Elements, Mathemics actually look like a really solid deck. I don't think they'll be able to compete with Sprites and Tearlaments, but I think they could be a really solid tier 1.5 to tier 2 strategy. Circular allows you to search for Superfactorial, which means that you can consistently attempt to search and resolve it during your opponent's turn. Superfactorial is kind of like a quick play Soul Charge, allowing you to special summon 3 Mathemic monsters from your graveyard with different names, and then either Synchro or Xyz summon a Mathemic monster using all 3 of them as materials. Now typically you're going to want to go into Laplation. Laplation has an on-summon effect where you can detach up to 3 materials from it and then perform some combination of sending a random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard, sending a monster, or sending a spell or trap from the field to the graveyard. This is a pretty significant form of interruption and feels almost like a mini Trishula, and is definitely something that the Mathmech deck aims to set up when they're going first. However, Superfactorial is a card that not a lot of people have really cared about. I think that when Mystic Fighters did come out, everyone really only cared about the Dragon Maids because they're a waifu archetype, so it was really easy to disregard Superfactorial as being a bad pull, especially since Mathemechs haven't seen any sort of competitive success over the last couple of years. Now, however, with Circular, the deck has caught a lot of people's attention, and Superfactorial has gone from being under $1 to now being a $10 to $11 card. Quite a jump that is a direct result of the release of Circular. If you guys have any of that bulk from Mystic Fighters, you just might want to dig up your extra copies of this card as well as any other Mathemech cards such as Equation and Subtraction, and just check to see what other pieces of the deck people are looking to grab, because this is probably your best bet at offloading them. Next, let's look at Offerings to the Doomed. Now, this is an extremely old quick play spell card that came out way back in Labyrinth of Nightmare, which was like the 5th core set ever, and it has an extremely simple effect. You get to destroy a monster on the field, but then you skip your next draw phase. Now, interestingly enough, this card is being used in Sky Striker decks, as it can be another spell card to land in the graveyard, as well as provide an interruption during your opponent's turn. Skipping your draw phase does kind of suck, but with Shizuku searching you a card during the end phase, Hayate dumping a card that can be retrieved by Kagari, and theoretically you always drawing a card when you resolve Engage, you should still be able to keep your deck running even if you resolve Offerings to the Doomed. Now, this card does actually have several different printings, but most of them are commons, so if you just want to use a budget one in Sky Strikers, you can probably still grab one for like a quarter or something like that. However, if you are looking for a holo copy, they are going to be a bit pricier. The Lost Art Ultra Rares are actually the highest rarity, now sitting at $15 each. There is a super rare from a Speed Duel tournament pack. I didn't even know those existed before I was looking this up. They're around $5 to $6, and then there's also the DT versions, which are like a few bucks right now. There's just not really any near mint copies available on TCG Player. I think that this has been a tech in some Sky Striker list for a while, But with the success that the deck has been seeing at events recently, such as Ryan Yu's second place performance in Chicago, the card is starting to stand out and people are taking note of it. Remember, we still have more Sky Striker support coming at the end of the year, so it does seem like Sky Strikers are here to stay. However, just in case Mystic Mine gets banned on an upcoming list, you might be better off getting rid of some of your higher rarity copies of this card that you may have lying around. Alright, next up we're talking about Mischief of the Yokai. So this is an interesting one, allowing you to reduce the levels of all monsters on the field by 2. It also has a graveyard effect where you can banish it to target a face-up monster on the field and reduce its level by 1. So this card is being talked about as a tech option for the tier limit strategy against sprites, as they can mill this card and then use its graveyard effect during your opponent's turn to hit their monster down 1 level and preventing them from summoning out sprites from their hand. However, the other card that is incredibly similar to this but might be a bit better is Mischief of the Gnomes, which reduces the level of all monsters in each player's hands by 1, including after they are summoned, and then you can banish it from the graveyard to do exactly the same thing. So there's a couple of small differences for each of these, like how Mischief of the Gnomes only reduces by 1 level for its on-field effect, but its graveyard effect is a blanket effect rather than just targeting one monster. One thing that's a big difference though, however, is the price. Mischief of the Gnomes is a common that's only going to cost you a few dollars. However, Mischief of the Yokai is from the infamous core set Star Strike Blast and only has the 1 availability ever. It definitely has extremely limited availability, and so the listings on TCG Player at the moment are quite high. For an ultimate rare, you're looking at having to spend $50 each, which is pretty crazy because apparently it has actually moved for that price. For the ultras, it's a bit different. The cheapest copies available for sale on TCG Player right now are $40, but from looking at the sold listings, we haven't seen any actual sales above the $10 mark, so it's likely that this high price point is just due to a lack of supply being available up for sale, and also people pulling their listings off to see where the price can go. Honestly, to me, this card is just way too overpriced and I wouldn't be paying anything close to these prices for it. I think that there are definitely other side deck or tech cards that you can use in the meantime for the sprite matchup, maybe things like Mischief of the Gnomes or Stygian Dirge, so that you can wait for this card to be reprinted and made much cheaper and more accessible before you grab them to try it out. So one last card that I really want to talk about here is Dark Ruler No More. It's not like this card is trending right now, but I think it's an important one to look at, so I'm talking about it anyways. In my opinion, Dark Ruler No More is a card that you should definitely be looking to pick up sooner rather than later. You should know what this card is by now. It negates the effects of all of your opponent's face-up monsters on the field, and they can't respond with monster effects to this card, but in return they don't take damage for the rest of the turn. So when I look at the game recently, I see a lot of people looking at board breakers that out multiple cards, so things like Lava Golem and Sphere Mode. Dark Ruler No More is something that I've been seeing people slipping into their main deck even a lot recently. In fact, if you go back to looking at early Power of the Elements format in the OCG, a lot of players actually made the switch from hand traps to board breakers. A lot of the time, drawing 1 or 2 hand traps doesn't really do anything since decks can just play through them and set up a board anyways, and now you have 2 fewer cards to use to try to handle the board. So I think that there is a chance that we could see a similar shift here in the TCG, where we have board breakers and maybe not so many hand traps, and if that's the case, I think that Dark Ruler No More is absolutely a card that everybody should own at least a set of. For right now, we have the Secret still a bit pricier at $10 to $11, but we also have 2 different Structure Deck common printings. Each of those is right around the $3 mark. Picking up a set of a side deck card or potentially even main deck card in the near future for under $10 seems like a no-brainer, especially for a card that has a history of trending back up in price. If you guys can grab them, I'd even argue that you should stock up on a few extra copies. I don't know just how high they can go in terms of price, but I'm thinking that the demand for this card will skyrocket within the next couple of months. Okay guys, that is it from me for today. Just a reminder that we have the Power of the Elements sneak peek events coming this weekend. Super exciting. I hope that all of you are going to get misprint packs that are just full of Starlight Rares. I personally am going to be looking for Tier Limit stuff, even though Tombox now owes me a Tier Limits core, because that's the deck I want to play going into this upcoming format. Anyways, if you guys did enjoy today's Market Watch, make sure that you let me know by slamming that thumbs up button. Also, let me know what you guys think about the cards we talked about today and what other cards are trending on the market in the comment section down below. And also, if you haven't already, of course, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.